All right, Mike, thank you so much for coming out for an interview real quick. I realize it's kind of short term. These are questions that are from the community, Shenmue Dojo and Shenmue 500K on Facebook. I'm James. I go by the name Shengoro86 in the community. I've been around since 2002, and I'm one of the main modders as well. So I make a lot of mods for Shenmue.
That's amazing. I did a little Google research on you because I was like, I need to do my homework a little bit. It's been 15 years since I've worked on the game, which is crazy. And as a caveat, I'll just say now, just to not sound intelligent, because I think the Shenmue community is amazing and they know the game maybe even better than some of us testers do now at this point in time, because you guys have been living it and keeping it alive for so long. But it's really awesome to be here and talk to you guys about the game. And I did a little digging a couple years back just to see what the buzz was about the game out there and what people were talking about. And it is amazing how long people have been dedicated to this series, and it's almost, I think, due in part to the fact that it was an unfinished series and people were just hoping to get that third chapter of the story.
It's been a crazy ride.
I was going to tell you a quick story. So that
sure.
James, you brought your copy of the game, your original copy that you owned back in the day, and hopefully played through a few times.
many times.
So the manual cracks me up because this project was huge in so many ways, and if you think about it for the game and the fact that it was, for all practical purposes, one of the first free open sandbox world games, and having to test something like that didn't really exist prior to that was a really daunting task. But little things like manuals, strategy guides, test plans and things like that were just crazy different than any other game out there. But I remember in particular the person that was working on the manual and the packaging at the time came by my desk right at the end of the project, and he was like, hey, I just want you to look this over real quick and make sure everything's good before we go to print. And he showed me the manual, and I, of course, as a tester, you always go back and look for the credits, and in the credits my name is here as like the lead QA tester, and they misspelled my name. So they spelled it Rhineheart. And I was like, hey buddy, my name's misspelled. It's no big deal. I actually kind of like the way they spelled it. But he goes, oh man, we're already in print. So I was like,
but didn't you just ask me before we go to print?
That's right. So
that was great. I love it.
It was a good story, but just getting your name in the credits was a huge deal back in the day when you were working, especially in tests. Like, we all took huge pride in what we did, and Sega Test in particular. I don't know if I can explain the world of Sega Test in a short amount of time, but it was we used to call it University of Sega, and it was a group of just super talented, passionate video gamers from all walks of life. We had all sorts of people. I had one tester that was known as the tattoo guy. The guy was covered in tattoos, and he was most famous because he had a Sonic the Hedgehog tattoo that ended up getting picked up by some magazine at the time. I think it was MVC. Picked up a picture of his tattoo, and he was kind of infamous within our group. And then we
Sonic guy.
all sorts of people. And Shenmue in particular, we had, I think, 20 people at any given point in time testing the game on a daily basis. And the shift for Shenmue was crazy. So I think in general, and I think we're going to get to that question, so I don't want to jump ahead, but it was in test full time for about 6 months. And the objective of the test group was different from time to time. So when we first got the game, our first objective was pull up every possible overlay, text overlay, and make sure that it was spelled correctly, or make sure that it's grammatically correct, or make sure, and
Just gotta put this a little closer,
problem.
Just in case.
The early versions of the game, so like the one that I actually have out there for sale right now.
The beta,
there are text overlays that are just like running off the screen because it was like the first time they took the US translation of the game and added it into the game. So that was like the first goal, was to sit there and literally trigger every possible character's on-screen text.
Okay, actually, just to interject, so I told you that I make mods for Shenmue, right?
Yes.
So I work on a bunch of different things, and that beta actually comes into play because the menu where you're able to load like whatever zone with whatever entry point is awesome. Now, in the menu in the game. Like when you're playing in the game, you plug the controller into the fourth port, you hit start, you get the debug menu.
Yep.
What are the flags? Do you
Oh
remember?
my gosh, I cannot remember what the
Because
flags are.
what
Yeah.
I noticed is I feel like Shenmue has like a progression system. So like you talk to this person, flag 0 turns to yes, like a binary decision. You talk to this person, flag 1 turns to yes, and it's like a way of the game knowing where you are. Because I noticed that because I use disc 3 for all my mods, but if you turn all the flags off, you get all of the subtitles for conversations on the first disc. So I assume it's a progressive system. So I was just wondering if you might have...
That's such a tough one. So we were handed the first build of Shenmue with the debug menu, and basically said, figure out how to make it work. Mm-hmm. And it was crazy because it took probably 2 days, 10 people banging on that menu to figure out, hey, plug it into the fourth port. We got to progress through things. The flags, the best thing I can remember about flags is that it was tied to your notebook. So as you triggered an event, it would show up in your notebook. I believe that they're one and the same. So
that makes sense because when I was turning flags on, I would notice, different things in the notebook. Which I thought the notebook was interesting because figuring out how to get Shenmue off of a GD-ROM to run on CDI, like a CDR via mil CD.
Yep.
And like when we were hacking the first read binary file, like the entire notebook is just dumped in it. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like this game isn't like so crazily programmed.
Well, and that's here's the amazingly special but daunting thing about the game is that every character in the game had a path and progression unique to themselves. So, Nozomi would be at the flower shop at certain times of the day, and then she would go home at certain times of the day, and that was her progression throughout the day. And oh, by the way, on this day, she may not be at the flower shop because there was some event that was supposed to happen or trigger. And so that, as we were going through this, nobody told us this in advance. No one said, hey, this is what the game's about. Mm-hmm. We had an idea. The Japanese game was done for all practical purposes at that time. A discussion about it within the test, but nobody knew how complex that world really was. It was a truly living world. And as we started testing it, the more we tested it, the more we were like, this is way bigger than anyone ever told us.
We're like, oh no.
and it was like, okay, I can go to a location at one time in one day and run into 5 people, and I can go to the same location 2 hours later the next day and run into 5 different people, and different events can happen. And we started having this notion of there were rare events, there were common events, there were common people, call them non-player characters that would just say, hey, what's up? And then there were some medium characters that would engage with you a little bit at a certain given point in time. And then we realized there were one-time events. There were things that would happen one time in the game, and either you passed or you didn't. It could be QTE that popped up, and then you never see it again. And then we also noticed that, hey, this tester over here didn't get that event, and we were like, oh my goodness. So like, there are things happening in this game. That's right. Like I would have 5 guys doing the same thing, and they would have different experiences, and that was really just when we realized how big and special the game was.
That is really cool. Wow. Yeah, Shenmue has a lot of QTs that you might miss, and some of them don't even have failure states. So like, I can only imagine from a testing standpoint, like how insane that is. Oh God,
it's crazy. And not to jump ahead, one of your questions was, were there any bugs in Shenmue that you knew about, and any scenes that you knew about that you bugged that ended up staying in the game?
Sorry, I'm like jumping. So I'm like excited to just talk about Shenmue.
It's the same for me.
All right, so I guess I'll just go in order. So we have some questions from the community, from Shenmue Dojo and Shenmue 500K. You already answered what it's like to beta test Sega. Do you feel that the beta testing process for Shenmue was different because of Yu Suzuki's, like, he's very hands-on with his games? Did he have any influence on how you guys perform, like, your beta testing?
It was completely different from any game we had in tests, and one of the reasons was it was on multiple discs, which I don't think there were any multiple disc games at the time. Maybe D2 came through prior to Shenmue, and I'm going off memory here, so that might have been like one of the first multi-disc games coming through, but this one being on originally 3 discs and then 4 because of the passport disc in itself made it bigger, and then because it was Yu Suzuki, the security level was through the roof. So the way we checked in and checked out discs was crazy. So you might have seen some of the discs online that popped up. They'll have a beta version, they'll have the date, and then they'll have like a number with a circle on it. The number with a circle on it was that we numbered all the discs, and when we would hand them out, we knew what tester had what disc. And that way, when they checked it back in at the end of the day, we would get them back all on a pile together, and if it was 1 through 10, they were all there, everything was great. And the test department was great stand-up citizens, but it was really easy for things to go missing. You know, like it's just the nature of how many discs we're dealing with. I'm handing out 20 copies of disc 1 to people. I'm handing out 20 copies, and it was really easy for things to get misplaced or put up into someone's cubby or whatever you name it. And there were, at any given point in time, there was 2 testers sharing a cubicle together, sometimes full the height of testing mayhem. So it was easy for things to get misplaced. So it was we were extra careful with the discs, and large in part because it was such a big, important project for Sega at the time. And it was also because it was Suzuki, who was very very protective of this game.
He loves Shenmue. Like that's his pride and joy. I've met Yu Suzuki 3 times.
Great person though, right? He commands a room, super calm. Like he speaks, and everybody's hanging on every last word that he says. And hearing him talk about Shenmue, which I think we're going to get to at some point in time, you're right. He absolutely loves the game. He's very passionate about it, and the foresight that went into building this world. I mean, obviously it was in years of development. It's clearly an important pet project of his.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a lot of the game's philosophies are based upon his own. He went on a trip to China that really influenced the creation of the story. Do you guys have any bugs that remained in the game after QA in Japan?
Great question. So there's 2 answers to this. The first answer is, for all practical purposes, the game was somewhat complete. So it was actually less of a beta than most games that come into test work.
Okay.
So the game was pretty well put together, but there were a lot of bugs. And at first, our original task was just fixing text. As we were going through that, we started seeing things that maybe slipped through the cracks the first time around for the Japan version of the game, and started bugging those. And our transition from, okay, let's worry about the text, to let's make sure gameplay and legal things in the game, and maybe even the tone of certain conversations were what should be released in the United States. And that was kind of the way the game testing shifted. And so the answer is, there are bugs in the game, and there are things that we said, hey, this is an issue, we should fix it. And Sega of Japan or AM2 would say, we have time to fix it, or we don't. Or this is by design, or it's not. And a great example would be forklift racing. So I get, if anyone in the Shenmue community meets me and they're like, hey, what was your job? I was like lead tester. They're like, F you for the forklift mode, because I found a shortcut, and by finding that shortcut, it made my life a miserable hell, because it wouldn't acknowledge the fact that I did that. And we knew about it. We bugged it.
Actually, I think I know the exact thing you're talking about. When you're making a left, there's you can make the 90-degree angle left, or you can cut through this way. But if you cut through that way, it doesn't change the lap number.
It doesn't register the lap number. And so that's it's something we knew about. I probably personally wrote the bug for it, and AM2 decided that it wasn't a big enough issue to address in the game. So it's how it works when you're in test. You can find things, and things may end up staying in the game because the developer says it's too much work, or not that big of a deal. Another bug that stayed in the game, and something that scared the crap out of me as the lead tester, was this QTE that pops up, and I'm going to get the name of the town wrong. Is it Dobuita? Where the schoolgirls are hanging out, and there's a schoolgirl QTE. Dobuita, so there's some harsh language. That's right. It's just bastard and asshole pop up in the game. And that QTE is a rare QTE. It doesn't pop up for everybody, and you have to be kind of heading in the wrong direction in the game at that point in time to trigger it. And I believe you have to be using the shortcut as well, which isn't a common path for the game. So it's shortcut. And we triggered it very late in the test cycle. So we were, let's call it close to September, I want to say. And September is getting close to the end of the project.
September 1999?
Yes.
Okay.
September...
Or was it 2000? 2000.
September 2000.
Yeah, that's right.
We were getting close to the end of the project, and we saw that QTE for the first time. And I literally had a heart attack. And the way we tested back in the day, we had a TV with a VCR attached, and everything was recorded as we were playing through the game. And so one of my testers came by, and he was like, hey, Mike, you need to come see this. And he hit play on his VCR. And I just sat there and I was like grabbing my face. I was like, oh my gosh. And so we bugged it. We bugged it because it was somewhat harsh language, and we were worried that it might raise the level of the ESRB rating on the game. So it's a teen game.
Yeah.
But that's kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. And then we also bugged it because we didn't see it before, and we were like, was this not in the previous versions of the game? And it was just something that we didn't find an easy way to trigger. And even with the debug menu and everything, it wasn't something that was easy to make happen.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool. I think my favorite bug in Shenmue is the Stair Glitch.
Tell me about the Stair Glitch. I probably will remember.
Oh yeah, so in Dobuita, the opposite side where you see the girls. So when you make a right at the arcade, there's the stairs that go up.
Yep.
And then Sakuragoka is right after that. It's a little hard to describe. So you get to so there's like two sets of stairs. There's the top stairs, then there's a little platform, there's the bottom stairs. So you get on the platform, you walk down the stairs without holding anything on the controller. You press left to pivot left, you press left to pivot again, the run button. And you hold down, once you start running up the stairs, Ryo stops. The game thinks that he's just standing on ground. He turns around and then you're running like on midair.
In air.
Yeah.
You're hired, by the way. You are officially a Sega tester. That's amazing. I don't recall that one in particular, but we probably did see it.
That was discovered by, I believe, either Shenmue Dojo member Q or Shenmue Dojo member Landi C. One or the other. It was so long ago that it was discovered.
That's a really good one.
And Shenmue 2 is a really good glitch too, but I'll get to that in a bit.
The way you described the bug, and this is another, I feel like I'm all over the place with the questions, but the way you just described that bug, that was the other difficult part of testing, is that we had a very strict bug writing process.
Yeah.
And you were able to describe it so that if I was a programmer, I could go back and recreate that bug. And that was the way we had to write our bugs. And we had this, we called it redlining process. So we had a first redliner and a second redliner, and every bug that was written, and I think in Shenmue there were several thousand.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It had to go through that redlining process, and you had to write it so that it could be translated into Japanese. Yeah. And then a Japanese engineer, programmer, artist could go back and recreate that bug. And every bug had different frequency levels. So yours was a binary bug, the one you described on the stairs. It sounds like you could do that. The programmer could go back and recreate that, but there were bugs that would pop up that weren't binary. They were once bugs. One time, a tester did this and this happened, and they would have to go back and verify whether that was something that happened more than once or not. Sometimes, there was sometimes bugs. There was, always bugs, so binary bugs, and there was different ways to write it. So that just brought a huge flashback to me, the way you described that bug, and were able to recreate it, basically.
Yeah, it's a fun bug. You can use it to go like out of bounds, to like get behind the buildings, and then from there you can run all the way around Dobuita and force Ryo to get on the bus to skip all of disc 1 in like 5 minutes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's good for speed runs, I guess. I don't know. So moving on.
One more bug that remained in the game.
Yeah, sure.
I'm remembering. It's all flashing back right now.
I love
think
that.
There's a phone call to Nozomi.
Yeah.
And you can talk to her and ask her a question, and she answers a completely different answer. And I can't remember the conversation. I just remember using the phone from home and calling Nozomi, and she would just answer some nonsensical answer. And we caught that. There was multiple instances of that where the conversation didn't flow quite right. And we're like, hey, this isn't right. But sometimes they were.
What have you been drinking?
That's right, exactly.
Too much sake. I'm coming right over.
And that was another rare event. It was another one that was like, it doesn't happen all the time. It would only happen sometimes.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, you can actually. I do a lot of audio hacking in the game, and it's funny to like mess with the AFS structures, because AFS is the audio packaging.
Yep.
And like, cause it's like in a particular order, so when you start like messing it up and screwing the CRC checks, you can get like the most hilarious conversations. So like Ine-san starts talking like Tom, because it's referencing a specific audio file. But when you mess with like where the audio files are in the packaging, it's I love it. There's a good video online.
Oh,
Somebody
wow.
did that, yeah. All right,
awesome.
so that covers the bugs in the final version. Did you beta test any gameplay events or cutscenes that were cut off from the final release? Because there's a lot.
There are a lot, and I can't recall off the top of my head. The only answer I can say is there definitely were some, and not by intention,
Yeah.
but some of the writing in the game came across as, at least to us in tests, maybe, and I hate using this word because it wasn't intentionally meant that way, but it could have come across as racist.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of discussion about Chinese, and there was a very big theme in the game, and the way it was written in some ways, it was potentially like not the way we would say it here in the United States.
Shenmue 2 has a lot of those instances, especially with like way characters are, but they're actually censored between the different region releases. Like the Japanese Shenmue 2 has a guy that has like a turban. They took him out in the PAL and NTSC versions.
There are not many of those in existence. So the katana system, basically the way it worked is QA, none of us had a katana because it wasn't true testing. Because it was hooked up to PC at the time.
Shenmue doesn't run on the test hardware. Now that I think about it, like if you rip a GDI dump to the internal hard drive, it doesn't boot.
It won't boot.
Yeah.
And I want to say that we had the way we sat. We had a big QA area.
Yeah.
And then the producers, the localization producers, all sat kind of near us because we had constant discussions with them. They would come and say, "Hey, what did you see?" And then they would relay it to Japan. And those guys had katanas at their desk, and they would typically run games on katana, but I don't remember Shenmue running on katana.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the test environment for Shenmue was like during development. It definitely wasn't just a standard Dreamcast dev kit. I know they use Soft Image a lot with some weird Shenmue plugin for it, which Autodesk owns that software now. Actually, that plugin is like the holy grail of the Shenmue community. We can't find it, so.
Really? Oh my gosh.
You don't by any chance have it, do you?
I don't have that plugin.
That's all good.
Yeah, the only
Autodesk won't give it to me.
I know enough people to work on the game. We should be able to find it.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a lot of lost items within the Shenmue community that may be able to be recovered if we ask the right people. Who knows?
Yeah.
But
actually, that's leading on to another question. But just to finalize that, like, if we had the Soft Image plugin, we'd be able to make like custom animations, and like from a modder standpoint, I'm just like, ugh. Yes.
Create your own chapters of the game.
Yeah, right. We'll make the boat chapter.
Oh my gosh.
We'll make Shenmue 7 or whatever, or Shenmue 0. So let's see here. Okay, so I know the answer to this question.
Yes.
Do you personally own any beta builds? So I guess now the question is, do you own any beta builds besides the one you put on eBay?
It's a great question. So the answer is of the project. It was like it never happened. So once a game was done, all the beta builds were typically destroyed. In the case of Shenmue,
really?
Yeah. So they would take the discs and send them off to get shredded.
It's like we found like the Half-Life build and all that, which never even came out. That was wow.
Yeah. So beta builds are not super common. In the case of Shenmue, it was such a big project that took so much time from so many people's lives that they were like, hey, have a memento. These are probably going to be pretty cool at some point in time. And I always had them. And I knew I had them, and I was like, oh, this is cool, I'll keep them. Maybe someday I get to share these with people or give them to community members or something like that. So yes, I have one version, which is the one you've seen so far, which has the debug menu, and I have a September late version.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the version I took with me on the road. I played for you, Suzuki, to show them what I was going to show the press, and then I actually toured the country and demoed the game for press and showed them kind of the different portions of the game and kind of gave them a taste of the game. And I carried, with that version, the September version, I carried, I think, 8 or 9 VMUs with me that had preloaded save files on them so I could access different parts of the game quickly for a press person that didn't have very much time to sit and kind of get the full gist of the game. 2
questions. So do you know what the differences between those 2 builds are, and how close are they to the retail version?
So the June build is, I call it an early beta. I believe there probably were earlier betas than that because Japan was working on the game long before we were.
Yeah.
But for us it was early because I know there's a bunch of text bugs in that version of the game, and it had the debug menu. September version doesn't have the debug menu, so we kind of took our training wheels off by that point in time. We're like, okay, we're comfortable that we've seen all the text in the game. Take the debug menu out because now we need to test it for real. And that was the thing. Anything I could create and make happen with the debug menu, I couldn't write as a bug. So if I triggered an event and there was a problem and I used the debug menu to get there, it wasn't technically a bug because it was the debug menu. So we had to, at a certain point in time, take the debug menu out and say, now we have to naturally make these things happen.
Yeah.
And if they still have problems, then it's an official bug.
Yeah.
So that probably happened, I want to say, late July.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the debug versions of the game, there's probably not that many of them.
Yeah.
In fact, the other one that was out there, and I saw a video of somebody going through the menu at the beginning of the game and kind of walking into like vast open space with no buildings or anything like that. That it looks like it's probably close to June version of the game.
Yeah, that beta was owned by one of our community members, and it was sent out. They dumped it and converted it to like CDI, mil-CD format, and that's like the common beta. It's labeled 0.4.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that means anything.
It doesn't to me. Like the version numbers didn't mean that much, although we were aware of them.
Yeah.
But they would change the game sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis. It just depends on how many bugs and how severe. We could get a new build the next day, or we could get a build 2 weeks. So the only thing I can think of, if my June version's of 0.1, which I believe that's accurate, and I wasn't the one that wrote that on there, it was the guys that burnt the discs and were told that was the version.
Yeah.
That 0.4 is probably 3-4 weeks later than the June version. Would be my guess. And I can't promise that's true, but that's typically how it would work.
I thought that beta was pretty cool because there's actually beta versions of maps on there. So like Sakuragaoka and Yamanose, which are the two first towns, they have completely different versions on the disc. It took us a little while to figure out how to make them walkable because the map info binaries don't actually have like good clipping and all that, so you can't go anywhere.
Yep.
So, but we managed to fix that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was fun.
What did you guys do for the so the two debug menus? There was the port 4 or port D, whatever you want to call it, debug menu, and then there was the main menu that you had to hit start before it flashed and went to the second start menu. That one, I know we were given this list of coordinates and told to plug them in and go to different locations. Have you guys figured out how to figure, so you know them all?
Entry points and the scene codes?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
So scene is always the disk number, entry point is the code, so like JU00 is Yamanose, JD00 is Sakuragaoka, D000 is Dokuita, JAME is the Abe Candy Shop, JHK0 is the Hazuki Res. I have like it all.
I am totally impressed. That's so awesome. That was one of the things I thought for sure would be lost forever because that was something that was given to me and then shredded at some point.
Well, the thing is, the actual scene codes are only just references to the folders that the map files are in.
Okay.
So like I could take Dobuita and make a folder called like, I don't know, like shit or something, whatever, you know. And in the debug menu, you can just write that in and it loads it. So like when we make our beta builds, like when I do mods and stuff, so for instance, I made a version of that road that
very cool.
So, thank you. That was fun. It took a while.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah, I pretty much just moved all of the textures, which are all of the MT5s and PBRs, into a different map folder. And then I took the map info file. Do you know what I mean when I say map info?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. Yep.
So when you look at it from a hex editor standpoint, a lot of it is clear text. So there's a section of the hex code that is all the collision data. So it starts with a variable called cols. It ends with a variable called regd. So now you go into the map. The game engine thinks it's like Dobuita, but you're actually in the road to Amihama.
So you're able to walk.
Yeah, but the thing with Shenmue is that when you get outside of the bounds areas, it's all no clip. So like you don't get stuck, you can run forever. So now you get put into a situation where since the coordinates for the textures are so far away from the map that you're running with free roam at that point, but you're running through the map.
So you end up like looking off into a horizon that goes into nowhere at some point in time. Yep. And then if you want to get out of it, then you can fast forward time and get your watch to send you home and go to bed.
Beat me up, Scotty.
That's right.
Beat me up, Fuku-san.
That's so amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun. So I guess a couple more questions. This one's a little far-fetched, but did you ever get the chance to test the Saturn version?
I didn't. So I started at Sega in October of '99.
Yeah.
I answered a Craigslist ad that said video game testers needed. Didn't say what company, where for. I went to a temp agency in San Francisco. The temp agency said, so tell me about your video game history. I was a huge video game collector, player,
me as well,
Sega fan at the time. So I was like, this is me. And they're like, oh, this is perfect. We're going to send you somewhere. I'm not going to tell you yet. The somewhere that they sent me was Sega. So I went into Sega, interviewed, told them about my video game history. They're like, you're hired. literally within like a 2-day span.
Wow.
And they brought me in and started handing me games to test. And at first, when you first become a tester, they you have 1-day projects. So like work on this game for a day, work on this game for a day. And then once they start realizing, okay, maybe this guy kind of knows what he's doing, he's somewhat intelligent, they start saying, okay, work on this game for a week.
Yeah.
And work on this game for a week. And then eventually they're like, well, maybe he can lead a few people into a test program. So then I started working on games like Choo Choo Rocket, which was the first online game at the time, which, again, nobody knew how the hardware worked or how to get online, or the fact that your DNS codes were saved to the Dreamcast, and that once you had them in there, they were locked in there.
Yeah.
And we had all sorts of weird bugs, and we figured out, you could flash all sorts of weird stuff. So from Choo Choo Rocket, then fast forward to Shenmue, and they're finally like, do you want to take on a big project, an important project? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. Not knowing, but long story short, yes, that's kind of the progression of how I ended up retesting the game.
Nice.
In a roundabout answer, which took me kind of out and back again, the short answer is no, I didn't test the Saturn version of the game, and we actually didn't even get a chance to work on the demo. This is Shenmue demo. That wasn't even handed to us either. So.
Yeah. What was the name of it when it was handed to you?
It was Shenmue at the time, so we weren't given any early versions or the demo version of it or anything like that. They kind of wanted us to look at it as it was at the point in time, so that they actually didn't want us to have any kind of preconceived notion of the game. So they're like, don't play the Japanese version of the game. Don't do it. They were kind of like, just look at it for the U.S. version of the game. We want to look at it differently. So that was kind of the take on it. But the Saturn is interesting. So I'm a huge Sega nut, huge fan. Mega Drive.
Old Sega, right? Not Sonic Boom Sega.
Yeah. So look, when I was a kid growing up, I had a Commodore 64. That was my video game.
Actually, I used to work for Bill Hurd, by the way.
No way.
Yeah, he was my network guy because he owns a network company in New Jersey.
Oh, that's crazy.
One of the programmers there.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I have his number. I should call him and be like, hey, I got a C64 kid here.
So I was a Commodore 64 guy, and then I had a neighbor that had a Master System, and that's where I started falling in love with Sega products. The Master System was awesome, the games were amazing, and then Genesis, and then Saturn. Also, I was a huge fan from the get-go, and the interesting thing about the Saturn and the Dreamcast, that was another bug that I wrote because it's, what do you call it, an anachronism? The fact that there was a Saturn in the game in 1986.
And Virtual Fighter posters.
Correct.
And Sonic figurines.
Yeah, so
and
all
pictures
those
of Shenhua on the chocolate. Who is this girl?
Yeah, there's so many unanswered questions, And the videos that had been released prior to the game, didn't all jive. You clearly knew that there was more to the game because, why is he standing on a cliff? What does it have to do? Yeah, who is this girl? There's a lot of things that weren't answered in Shenmue 1, but the short answer is, I was the guy that probably bugged all the anachronisms of the game. So all the inaccuracies, the fact that Virtual Fighter was in there, the Saturn, you get to take, hang on, correct for the time frame, that was fine. But the fact that you could take it home and buy it at the store and then play it in your Saturn in your house, incorrect for the time frame. So I wrote those bugs, but at the same time, I loved that. And just to tell you how much work it was to look at all those different things in the games, I had people dedicated to that type of stuff. So there was a guy that was my arcade guy. Go play the games in the arcade, show me how far you can get. Keep playing them every day. And we would have high score battles and who could get the farthest. And I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, Hang On has an ending, and I don't quote me on this, but we had some guys get really far in it, and it's the full ROMs of the game.
So you're saying that the names that are actually in the game are the beta testers?
I don't think that the names those aren't. But we would play everything and try to get high scores and make sure that everything was complete and didn't break. And there was a guy that was dedicated to the arcade. There was a guy that was dedicated to the Saturn at home. There was a guy that was dedicated to getting all the music. There was a guy that was dedicated to going to all the vending machines and getting all of the little figurines out and collecting the entire array of figurines.
That's so much work. Never bother going for a full, I'll just Game Shark it at that point.
That's right. And then even the soda machine, the version of Shenmue that's out there right now that I have on eBay, that one has a Coca-Cola machine in the game.
Oh, really?
So there's an actual real branded Coca-Colas in the game.
Yeah.
But that was something we bugged right away. We're like, hey, Coke's going to sue us.
It was in the Japanese version, yeah.
And their answer was, in Japan, and I don't know if there was a gold deal with Coke or not, but their answer their short answer was, in Japan, we don't get sued for doing things like that. It's just not a litigious country. In the U.S., we're like, Coca-Cola will come after us if we leave it in the game. So we either need to get a deal going with them or you change it. So they decided to change it.
They don't care about the free marketing.
Exactly.
Okay, so you already said that it was in beta for 6 months.
So it was in full test for 6 months, and my personal shift as lead tester was, and we were all hourly employees. I was a full-time Sega employee at the time, but everybody that worked with me and all the testers were typically hired through a temp agency. So it was so they could hire and let people go depending on what games were in test. So I was working on the game from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. for several months straight, and I would have 2 shifts of testers. I would have a morning shift and an afternoon shift, and I had a test plan to basically go through the game and have people explore different portions of the game through that. And that was 7 days a week too, so it wasn't like I had weekends off or anything like that. It was crazy hours, constantly pouring through the game. And we'd be finishing the game, I would want to say, like, on average, my team probably finished the game 20 times a week, maybe, or so. So we would see the good ending, the bad ending, the different QTEs, and we tried to see everything we possibly could in the game. So by the time the game was out, we had seen everything.
Wow. Yeah, Shenmue is it's a very big game, isn't
it?
Vast. Okay, this is a good question. So when you would send, actually you answered this before about AM2 like deciding whether it's in the budget or time constraints.
They were very respectful though. Like, the one thing I will say, like, the development structure of Sega at the time was very development team focused. That's why they all had names. You had Sonic Team, you had AM2.
Yeah.
And they were very respectful of the test team. Typically, development teams and test teams don't get along. They go, test team would say, I see this bug, and the development team would say, well, I don't need to fix it, whatever, you guys are testers. And it wasn't like that. There was a lot of respect between the test group at Sega and the different development teams, and they relied on us for a lot of different things. For localization, they relied on us for finding bugs, they relied on us for legal checks, so we would have like a legal check. They relied on us for submissions through for submitting the game and finalizing it and getting it to manufacturing. So they used us for a lot of different reasons, and so for that reason alone, they were great to work with.
Sweet. So the next question is something that means a lot to me, actually.
Okay.
There was an interview about 12 months ago, about a year, a little less than a year ago, where he mentioned that there was a feature in the game code that lets you pretty much give you the ability to move all the buildings around. I was wondering, did you guys test anything like that?
We didn't get to test it, but it doesn't surprise me whatsoever, because there had to be a tool to build these towns, right? Like, there had to be a tool to move things around. Like, there had to be a creator within the game. So
sorry, they were just really
no problem at all. So the answer is we didn't get to work with any of those tools, but the fact that they're saying that it's in the game, or they had a version of the game that allowed you to do that, doesn't surprise me at all. Because you had to build this somehow. And you weren't building and placing things by scratch. There had to be some sort of mechanism or tool or interface that was proprietary to Shenmue that allowed you to build this world.
I've been searching so hard trying to find that. I've been going through every single line in first read, which is a couple thousand lines, just looking for that binary on off, and I'm like, no, please.
It has to be. I would imagine that it's almost like Mario Maker, right? It's almost like there's got to be some sort of proprietary tool that lets you build the town. I can't imagine having to do all that from scratch and just coding it and doing the art for it.
Even if they're building from external software, you assume they would want some type of internal control to be able to make quick adjustments. They have to keep going back and back and back.
Exactly.
Especially when you're dealing with types of games where you have to rebuild them into a format. So you can decrypt the GDI, the raw data files, but then you need to put them back in. So unless you're modding from a hex standpoint, you have to keep rebuilding that. It just doesn't make sense. So moving on, did you get to test Shenmue 2?
I did not get to test Shenmue 2. So Shenmue for me was the launching platform from Sega Test to Sega Marketing. The cool thing that happened after working on Shenmue is that they needed somebody that understood the game well enough to go out and show it to press.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, let's get somebody from the marketing team. Well, nobody on the marketing team had the time or the they said, well, why don't we bring Mike along with us, and we'll have one of the marketing guys talk about the game and let Mike demo the game. And that was like my introduction to the marketing side of Sega. And they said, hey, this guy actually can speak and he's intelligent. Why don't we bring him over to marketing and see if we can use him over here? And so that after the Shenmue project, they stole me from the test department and put me over in Sega marketing. So thanks to Shenmue, but I didn't get a chance to work on Shenmue 2.
Did you by any chance get to test so there's a very special version of Shenmue 1 that's been sought after the community for a while. Corey Marshall, the voice of Ryo, who's an awesome guy, mentioned that when he was originally playing the game, they gave him a version of the game that had Japanese audio and English subtitles, which was never actually given out at a retail release. Did you by any chance see that version?
That's a great question. I did not personally see that version that I can recall.
Okay.
What I do remember, and I know you've seen this version, is the US Shenmue release in Japan.
Have one sealed.
That's right, and I actually recently sold one, and that was like a huge feeling of pride for me, the fact that Japan went and took the US release of the game and actually brought it back to Japan. That tells me that they were very happy with the job that we did and the experience that we helped create through testing the game and localizing it.
Yeah, Suzuki said himself that he was actually very proud of that. I asked him that in person, because I asked him, like, why would you do that? And he said, because, it was very cool.
That's exciting to me, and that might be the only Dreamcast game that kind of went that direction that wasn't produced in the US first and foremost. So that was really a cool thing.
Yeah, I think as far as I know, that might be the only one. I can't think of any others. Let's see.
Did Corey Marshall talk about doing the recordings, where he did the recordings and all that stuff? I want to say that they were in San Francisco when they did some of the voiceover, or were they?
No, I think he flew out to Japan.
He flew out to Japan?
Yeah.
So I do know that he had to go back and re-record stuff after we found bugs or found inaccuracies or things like that. So I know that he had to do a few sessions, and I wasn't sure if he did pickup sessions in the US or if he did everything in Japan.
Yeah, he recently did an interview where he said he did it in Japan. I mean, I could ask him.
It'd be interesting, because I could have sworn that some of the lines were captured in the US after we started finding issues with the language or whatever.
Maybe he was just generalizing, and then he had to do like touch-up jobs, from maybe like an in-house studio. So you already said that you met Yu Suzuki.
I did.
So what are your thoughts on Yu Suzuki?
I think he's amazing. Look, the Kickstarter that just recently was announced during E3 was such amazing news, and I sent it. So everyone knows that I worked on the game. I'm still in the industry. I work at 2K now. Everyone knows in the company that I used to work on the game. And everybody was like, "Did you see the news?" I was like, "Of course I saw the news. That's amazing." And the fact that the Kickstarter got such a great response and raised as much money as it did, and it speaks volumes to him as a person, because clearly people love his vision, in gaming, and it also kind of speaks volumes to the story that he's telling and everybody wanting to hear the end of it. And man, if it didn't leave an empty space in every fan's heart when Shenmue 3 wasn't released. I mean, how many people were just fanatically dying inside, hoping to hear the last part of that story? So I think, to me, that kind of tells you what type of person he is. But meeting him in person, I was super nervous. So he came out to the US to do interviews with press, talk about the game, talk about his vision of the game. He even brought up the acronym for the first time, FREE. Did he ever? So I can't remember what it stood for.
It's Full Reactive Eyes Entertainment.
That's right. So I heard him say that for the first time in person, like he was standing next to me when he explained that. And I was kind of thinking of all the work I had done on the game, and it all kind of made sense to me. I was like, wow, he truly had his hands involved heavily in the game. So he commands a room, like we talked about. He's very soft-spoken, very thoughtful about what he says, and super intelligent and very calm. I never heard him overreact to anything. I never heard him raise his voice to anything. And I believe I even posted this on Shenmue Dojo. I dropped a VMU on his foot, when he came to Sega
Oh,
of
no.
America. Yeah. So,
If you don't mind me asking, what's your username on the dojo?
it's probably Rhino2084 would be my guess.
Okay.
I blog in maybe a handful of times, so I believe that's what it is. But if it's not, it's some version of my name. But
You dropped it on.
I dropped the VMU on his foot.
Did you fail the QTE?
I absolutely failed the QTE. So as a tester and as a fan of Sega, like meeting him was a scary moment.
Yeah.
I've worked with athletes and all sorts of stuff throughout my video game years. Meeting Yu Suzuki, I was really nervous about, and so I had my handful of VMUs because I had to demo what I had saved for him. I saved and show it to him. Say, hey, this is what I'm going to show the press. And so I bring this handful of VMUs and I walk over to meet him, and he puts his hand out to shake my hand, and I reach out to shake his hand, and of course drop a VMU right on his foot. And I go, oh, sorry. It was very comical. It was very Chevy Chase, if you will.
What did he? What was his reaction?
He was fine. He laughed. He knew I was passionate, excited, and then I sat down and played the game for him, and that was kind of forgotten. He probably wouldn't even remember, but the fact that he came in and came into the QA department, the test department, which none of those guys ever did, but he did. He came in and sat down with me at our test TV, and I showed him the game in the test area. It was really cool. It kind of speaks volumes to who he is.
That's a really great story.
Right on his foot.
Yeah, I've met Yu Suzuki a couple times. It was by accident. Not really by accident. It was just like I didn't know he was there, so I saw him. But so I was at a convention in the United States here, and I am 19 years old at the time, and like this is during the time where like we just kind of got the mindset that we're never getting Shenmue 3. So this was 6 years ago.
Okay.
Or no, 10 years ago. No, wow. No, I'm sorry. I'm 26
I would have
now.
agreed with you.
7 years ago.
Okay, I would have agreed with you too. By the way, I never would have guessed that Shenmue 3 would be.
I always had hope because I always thought that there was such a strong passion for it that it had to happen. And if it wasn't going to happen, me and a couple other people were actually like considering forming a homebrew team to do it ourselves, which would have been insane.
That would have been insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 fan Shenmue games out of it, and then there's one that we worked on that was pretty much canned.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
We were recreating Chapter 2, which doesn't exist, and then making the rest of the story, because I'm very into the lore of Shenmue, like, on terms of the Chinese mythology behind it.
Yep.
So I can tell you what happens in Shenmue 3 pretty much, with the whole, like, the 4 heavenly beasts and, like, the Chi resurrection and all that, which kind of leads back to the Great War of the 3 Kingdoms, and, like, Yu Suzuki kind of gave details in Shenmue 3 already, which now kind of confirm all of that.
It makes sense.
Yeah, meeting Yu Suzuki was insane. So I played pool with him. He kicked my ass. It was good. That's a memory I have.
And did you at least sink the ball the first time you tried it, like in Shenmue?
No, we played billiards. I have some photos of it, but I won't release them because back then I had like super long hair and I looked like a stoner. So like I just look really bad in the photos.
Oh man, you shouldn't worry about that. That's amazing. So funny stories, I have them. Yes. So we, having worked on the game for so long, funny Shenmue stories. So having tested the game for a long time, we started having certain lines of the game embedded in our minds. It's just natural.
You like to find some sailors?
Exactly. So that's exactly what would happen. So we would walk in. I'd walk into the test department at 7 in the morning, and there were guys that had been crunching since the night before, and some person would yell out, "Hey, mister, you want to wrestle?" Or, "Do you know where I can find any sailors?" Or "That day." That was another one. Someone would just walk by and say, "That day," and then walk away. So we constantly were throwing lines at each other and saying them, and not necessarily knowing that we were doing it. It's just because we were living and breathing and eating it every day. So we were yelling out lines all the time. And I even had one of my testers create a Chinois Soda for me. Like he actually printed out an image of it and wrapped it around a soda and then gave it to me one day. And I was like,
nice.
"Oh, that's awesome."
A winning can.
That's right. So that's we definitely had a lot of fun.
Every time I drink liquor, like I'll get a whiskey bottle, be like, good.
Good.
Like if I would have went to the 2K thing last night, I totally would have busted that out. Nobody would ever get what I'm doing, probably except for you. But I would just be like, Shenmue. That's great though. It's great to see that the whole like the testers and all that are like really into like what they're doing.
We knew to explain in words what it was, but you knew while you were working on the game that this was something totally special and unique and groundbreaking, And even to this day, I brought the beta versions out and was testing and making sure they were working recently.
Yeah.
And my kids I have 3 kids, they were in the room and they were like, wait a second, you can go around this game and talk to people and time changes and wait, the sun goes up and the sun goes down, and they're like, they couldn't believe that this exists, and it's still kind of unique in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And there are open sandbox games out there now, but I still think the intricacies of this game were groundbreaking. Like they set the path for a lot of those open sandbox games out there.
There was a recent YouTube video that made a point where like you have games like Grand Theft Auto 5 that are huge, but they're huge for the sake of the scale, whereas Shenmue isn't as big, but it's a living, breathing world.
That's right. It's
a different feeling.
Yeah, it's got DNA. It's like, it's crazy.
Yu Suzuki said it the best. He says that he wanted to make a world that has smell.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And look, he had to think about every character in that game.
Yep.
Like that's the crazy thing. Like minuscule characters, important characters,
all on the backstory.
Everybody everybody has a story, and like that's, to me, that's just mind blowing. Like,
a lot of the characters in Shenmue 1 are actually based on the development team. So, for instance, there's a guy who is found in. This was in the Shenmue 3 video that he said this, one of the Kickstarter videos, where there's a guy in Sakuragaoka who's at the construction site holding a paper. And he's actually based on one of the developers of Shenmue from Japan, I think Takemoto.
Okay.
And like his character in the game is the owner of the cat who got ran over by the black car. So It's like these like little connections are amazing. Actually, there's a friend of mine who goes by the name Miles in Shenmue Dojo who made a database of every single character in Shenmue 2. It's like 500 plus NPCs.
Oh my gosh.
Based upon what you find out in the game and like things from the strategy guide that are like our official biographies. Mm-hmm. Oh man,
that's wild.
It's insane. So any final thoughts?
Yes. So the technical stuff. I am first of all, I'm really impressed with your knowledge of the game, especially the technical side of it. It's amazing to me, and I think the Shenmue community is unbelievable. Like, I feel really honored to be able to share these stories, and I was actually somewhat worried about whether I'd ever have the chance to share these stories. I kind of knew at the time I got to at least bank these in my memory and be able to share them at some point in time.
We have the Shenmue podcast. You can join if you want. Once in a while.
That would be amazing. Sure. I would feel. I would almost feel like, man, I hope I'm bringing to the table what you guys are able to bring to the table, which is this knowledge of the game that's
just the fact that you were directly involved just like transcends everything.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. So, yeah, and not to bring this down too much, but I was recently diagnosed with cancer a couple years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay, and everything's been great since but it's been kind of an eye-opening experience for me, and part of that experience was I was sitting at home recently going, I have these Shenmue items at my house. I need to get them out there, like, to people, and they're not doing any good at my house. They were sitting in an attic for 10 years, maybe more, and I was like, I need to at least get them back out to people that want these things. So that was kind of part of my reason for digging those out, and the fact that, you know, the interest in Sega's ownership of the title and the franchise now is kind of, you know, not any longer. So I felt like I wasn't doing a disservice to anybody by bringing these things out, and hopefully they'll go into some community members' hands and they'll be able to use them and enjoy them.
Yeah, when we saw that eBay go up, which is why I contacted. Thing we did, somebody makes a post at Shenmue Dojo, Shenmue Prototype, big words.
Yeah,
so I saw I'm like, guys, we got to start bidding on this and dump it and do all this crazy stuff. I was like, I'll do the mill CD conversion, like. Oh man, it's insane. So that's great that you were able to get a build. We're hoping that it's different from the one that we got.
I hope so too. I really do. Yeah. There's no way for me to really tell.
Yeah.
And the only thing I haven't done, and maybe I'm flying home today, the only thing I haven't done was cycle through the title screen debug menu, and I think you can do that too. If you hit the trigger,
you can
pull up the arcade games.
Yeah,
right.
I believe you can also put up the 80-man battle. I'm not sure.
The 80-man battle, yeah. But I don't think it shows like any sort of versioning in there. Like I don't think.
Yeah, I think the only way to tell what version it is just to judge the files and the creation dates for the files and all that. I mean, I have a hash of the original GDI that was dumped. I can compare it to. So, like, if somebody gets your disc, I can dump a whole like SHA-1 hash of it.
Yep.
And see what it comes out to, and if it's the same, then obviously it's the same build because those are like read only. So
it'll be interesting to find out. Yeah, there was no way for me to do it from like just a normal Dreamcast, and I don't know if you knew how the testing was done, but we had a system disk. So you put the system disk into the Dreamcast, and then there was also different versions of the Dreamcast.
Do you have a System 2 disc?
I do.
Oh man.
Yes, I have.
Those are so rare now.
I actually have 2 of them.
Yeah. You want to give one up?
I might have to. Yeah. So so they were. That was also kind of given to me. The funny thing was, like, I was the guy at Sega that they were like, "Oh, we're gonna throw this out. Do you want it, guy?"
Yes.
And I was like, oh, "Yeah, sure, I'll take it." Yeah. And a lot of the stuff was like, everything I received was on the up and up. Nothing was ever like, "Here you go. Here's something you shouldn't be getting." It wasn't like that. It was always like, "We're gonna throw this out. Do you want it?" Or "Thank you for your work on the game. Here you go." And that was kind of how it worked. But yes, that was system disk, and then we had different versions of Dreamcast. So Dreamcast was manufactured in different locations throughout its lifespan, and so we had them all versioned out, and we also had to test the game on all the different versions of the Dreamcast as well. So
yeah, I
somebody
believe
would be
there's
honest.
like a version 0 functionality.
Yep.
I have a version 0 and a version 1, but I don't have the one that doesn't have the MLCD. But now, actually, my Dreamcast is like super awesome. I got a dev BIOS in it, and then I also have a device where you take out the GD-ROM drive and you put in a USB GD-ROM controller.
No way.
So it loads everything off a USB stick. Yeah.
Oh my god.
You don't even need a System 2 disc anymore because
no
it loads,
load time.
A little bit because it's a 2.0 controller.
Yeah.
So when you're loading like GDI files, it has to load the entire raw file. So it depends.
Do you have a broadband adapter for your? Those are great too.
Yep.
There's so many cool little pieces of hardware, and broadband adapter was one of them for sure.
I really want to get the zip disk, but that's like hard to find.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, those were in existence. I forgot about that.
Yep.
My thoughts on Shenmue 3, I'll give them to you right now. So, first and foremost, I think that the Shenmue community, so like Shenmue Dojo, are absolutely instrumental in the fact that Shenmue 3 is coming out. Like the fact that you guys kept the love for Shenmue alive for so long and were so vocal and believed in Twitter events and having websites and
Save Shenmue.
That's right. But I was sitting there going, is this gonna work? But it didn't matter. Like I don't know if anyone actually cared whether it did or not. They just wanted to say, we want Shenmue 3. I think it worked. I think it absolutely worked. Like I think that was a huge reason that this happened and that the Kickstarter was so successful. And I almost don't care that a big publisher didn't pick up the game. Maybe it's better for the franchise that it didn't, right? Like I know that there was discussion about Sony maybe doing it, Sega interested in doing it. Who knew was going to do it? But it didn't matter at the end, right? It's almost better that it went this direction.
Yeah, I kind of feel like in hindsight, since like Yu Suzuki is doing it with his own team, and the only influence from the outside, from what I know from an outsider perspective, is that it's all monetary. So like there's not people coming in and making him change the game to what they would agree on. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So there's less outside influence, and so he can like do it how he wants to. So that's actually very good.
It's huge. And to be honest with you, like the Shenmue game, as far as a publisher is concerned, and I'm not speaking for any publisher, but if you think about it, was originally constructed on Saturn or for Saturn. So the architecture might be, to some person that's a bean counter, somewhat old, somewhat expensive. You know, the amount of money that was spent on developing Shenmue 1 was kind of astronomical at the time. Now it's a drop in the bucket compared to games. But all these things kind of surrounding the game probably makes a publisher look at it and go, well, it's going to be tough to turn a profit off the game. And that's kind of their concern. Somewhat understandable. So this direction that it's gone, the fact that Yu Suzuki gets to do what he wants to do and there's nobody telling him that he needs to do anything like that, is it's great. It's going to be an excellent chapter of the game.
I can't wait for it. Anyway, so I guess we're going to have to end it here because I'm running out of time. But Mike, thank you so much for coming out to talk.
My pleasure. Anytime. And if my memory is jogged and more Shenmue stories are up, I will participate at any point in time and share them with you guys.
Sounds good. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good one.